All right, so today we're diving into Stoic practice and what it can do for us in the quest for a meaningful life. I know you sent over Dr. Suresh Dabba's book, The Abundance of the Cluster of Life, in that first episode of his podcast series. I think we both really liked how much practical stuff he gets into about applying these old ideas to life today.
Definitely.
And you know what really jumped out at me right away?
What's that?
It's how he starts off. Like right out the gate with a Rumi poem.
Yeah.
It's almost like a mission statement.
Sure. That first stanza. Don't chase the view. You're the scene. Both seen and unseen, you're all that's been. Whether you go here or there, the purpose of here, there is you. Woof. It really sets you up to think about looking inward for finding meaning inside ourselves, not out there somewhere.
It does, doesn't it? And Dabba really builds on that throughout the whole episode.
Mm-hmm.
His main point seems to be, if we can get a handle on our human condition, you know, all those like unchangeable principles of existence, and then if we get our desires in line with those principles, that's where we find the real meaning. What do you think about this connection between really knowing ourselves and then, you know, finding that meaning?
That's huge. Not just in Dabba's work, but it's central to Stoicism as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
All the big names like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they were all wrestling with that question of how to live a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, a lot of it boiled down to understanding our place in the universe, accepting what we have power over and what we don't.
So it's not about trying to change the world. It's about changing how we see the world.
You got it. Dabba goes on to say how so much of our suffering actually comes from how we understand things, not the things themselves. This gets right to the core of what the Stoics were all about, turning inward and letting go of those external things to cultivate inner strength and peace.
Oh, that's interesting.
They had a word for it even.
Ataraxia. Ataraxia. I like that. I can see how that would be so powerful, but also probably super challenging. Like, isn't it Schopenhauer who said, seeking happiness from the outside is impossible. From within, it is difficult. Sounds pretty tough, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It takes work.
Yeah.
Consistent effort.
Yeah.
You know, even just realizing that our thoughts and interpretations have such a huge effect on how we experience things, that's a big deal in itself.
Yeah.
And that's where things like mindfulness come in.
And that's where I see this really interesting connection between what Dabba is doing and Stoicism. He keeps coming back to that idea of finding contentment within, even quotes Rumi again, the treasure you seek is within you, not in nothingness. They're both saying, hey, stop looking out there. The answer's already in you.
Totally.
Yeah.
And this brings us to one of the most important ideas in Stoicism.
Yeah.
Determinism.
Yeah.
This idea that everything happens for a reason. Like there's this big plan. Now, whether you believe in an actual plan or just the way cause and effect work, the Stoics use this to step back from the things they couldn't change. Like, why stress about the past if it had to happen? Why worry about the future if it's already set? All we have is this moment right now.
Okay, so how does that determinism thing actually play out in everyday life? It feels kind of, well, predestined. Like, why bother putting in effort if everything's already decided?
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's nuanced, though. The Stoics weren't passive. It wasn't about giving up.
Right.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're an archer aiming at a target. You control how carefully you aim, the strength of your pull, your focus right then.
Mm-hmm.
But once that arrow's gone, the wind, gravity, it's stuff outside your control. That affects its flight, right?
Mm.
The Stoics would say, focus on what you control, give it your best shot, but know the outcome's not all up to you.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to grasp.
And notice how it ties into living in the present moment. If we're hung up on what might happen or what did happen, we miss the power of acting intentionally right now. Modern psychology's picked up on this too. Think about Irvin Yalom and his work on existential therapy.
Oh, right. His books like Existential Psychotherapy and Staring at the Sun. He's big on facing our fears, not running away. I can see how that fits with Stoicism.
Definitely. It's all about being present with what is, not getting tangled up in those what ifs and if onlys.
And to make all this even more real, Dabba brings up how people react to illness and death. He says a lot of the distress around those things comes from not understanding those basic principles of existence. Like, we're all going to die, but we act surprised when it happens to us or the people we love.
So we're in denial, right? We get these principles intellectually, but emotionally we haven't truly accepted them. And that's exactly why the Stoics would reflect on their own death. Not in a morbid way, but as a way to stay grounded.
I can see how that would be helpful. If you're always aware of the big picture that everything is temporary, maybe you can appreciate the moment even more.
Exactly.
But how do you actually do this reflecting on death thing? Do you just sit around thinking about dying?
It's not about focusing on the scary stuff. It's more about shifting your perspective. What if you spent a day really feeling like it could be your last? How would your priorities change? What would you say to your loved ones? What would you do differently?
Wow, that's powerful. It would definitely make you rethink what's really important.
That's the whole point. The Stoics believed that thinking about our mortality could make us appreciate life more and really commit to living by our values.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this all connects. Understanding what it means to be human, focusing on what we can actually control, accepting that death is inevitable. It's like a whole framework for dealing with life's ups and downs with more grace and strength. But I'm curious about how we actually put this into practice. It's one thing to talk about Stoic ideas, but how do we make them part of our everyday lives?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer that fits everyone. But one thing Deborah really stresses, and it fits right in with the Stoic approach, is recognizing that it's a journey, an ongoing practice.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching some perfect state of Stoic enlightenment or whatever.
Yeah.
It's about showing up each day and making those conscious choices.
So it's less about being Stoic all the time and more about weaving those practices into our lives in a way that works for us.
Exactly. It's taking these old principles and figuring out how to apply them to our challenges today. One way to do that is to focus on developing what the Stoics called the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance.
Okay, let's unpack those a bit. What do those virtues actually look like in real life?
Let's say you're facing a tough decision at work. You could use wisdom by carefully looking at all the info, considering everyone's perspective before you decide. Justice might mean making sure your actions are fair and ethical, even when it's hard. Courage could mean speaking up for what you think is right, even if it's not popular. And temperance could be like staying calm and collected under pressure, not letting your emotions run the show.
I see how those virtues could be helpful in all kinds of situations. But is there a risk of becoming, I don't know, too detached, too unemotional if you're always trying to be Stoic?
That's a good point. It's important to remember that Stoicism isn't about squashing or denying our emotions. It's about understanding them, letting ourselves feel them, but not letting them call the shots. It's about that balance between feeling things deeply and acting wisely.
So more about managing emotions, not erasing them.
Exactly. The Stoics felt the whole range of human emotions, joy, sadness, anger, all of it. But they didn't let those emotions dictate their actions. They used reason to guide their choices even in the middle of strong feelings.
That makes a lot of sense. Responding to life's challenges with a clear head and a steady heart, even when things are tough. Now, I remember Deba talked about how people often get really upset when they don't reach their goals. He tied that back to not grasping those principles of existence. How does Stoicism view goal setting and dealing with setbacks?
That's interesting. Stoicism doesn't say you shouldn't be ambitious or have goals. It actually encourages you to chase after what matters to you.
Okay.
But the key is how you approach those goals.
So it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Kinda, yeah. The Stoics would say, do your best, but don't get hung up on the outcome. Focus on the things you can control: your effort, your intentions, your actions, and let the rest go.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. It takes the pressure off, right?
Definitely. It lets you enjoy the journey without being eaten up by anxiety about the result. Remember the archer analogy. You can't control the wind, but you can control how well you shoot the arrow.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's amazing how Stoicism, this ancient philosophy, feels so relevant today, maybe even more so now in our crazy, achievement-obsessed world.
I think so, too. It feels like there's this deep need for something more than just, material success. People are craving meaning, purpose, some kind of inner peace in the middle of all the chaos. And Stoicism gives this timeless framework for finding that.
It's like a set of tools for living a better life, no matter your situation.
I love that. And it's a toolkit that's always being updated and adapted to new situations. Remember, Stoicism is a living philosophy.
Right.
It's not a bunch of rigid rules, but a flexible set of principles that can help us deal with life's complexities.
I really like how Deva blends these old Stoic principles with the beauty of Rumi's poetry.
Yeah.
It creates this tapestry of insights for how to live well. Like a reminder that wisdom can be found in all sorts of cultures and times.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just learning about Stoicism. It's about connecting with that human search for meaning and purpose. Recognizing that the journey to a fulfilling life is all about self-discovery. And there are lots of paths to get there.
And what really stands out to me is this focus on inner transformation. It's not about changing the world around us, but changing ourselves from the inside out. Like Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Exactly. Stoicism gets that real lasting change starts with the individual. It's about nurturing our inner world so we can better handle the outer world.
It's about recognizing that the power to live a more meaningful life is inside each of us.
Yeah, it really does all come back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The power within.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so appealing about both Stoicism and Rumi's mystical poetry. They both point us back to ourselves, not in a selfish way or anything, but in a way that like empowers us to take responsibility for our own happiness,
Yes.
for how we react to the world.
And by doing that, we don't just find more peace inside ourselves, but we're also more ready to help others. Remember, the Stoics were big on the idea that we're all connected. It's like threads in a big tapestry. So when we grow and learn to master ourselves, it spreads out, touches the people around us. It's like that idea of Ubuntu, right? The interconnectedness of all things. So many connections here. So tell me, if someone listening is thinking, okay, this is all great, but where do I even start? What's a good first step they can take to start living by these Stoic principles?
One of the most practical and helpful things is just becoming more aware of your thoughts and reactions as you go through your day. Notice those times when you're getting caught up in worry, anxiety, frustration. Don't judge yourself. Just observe.
So like that mindfulness thing again, paying attention to what's going on inside without getting swept away by it.
You got it. And as you get better at noticing your thought patterns, you can start to question them. Ask yourself, is this thought useful? Is it based in reality? Is this something I can control?
It's like creating a little pause between the thought and how we react to it. So we have more freedom in how we choose to respond.
Exactly. And in that space, you can start picking responses that are more helpful, more constructive. Maybe you can look at the situation differently, focus on what you can do, or just let go of whatever's causing you stress.
All right, so as we wrap up our deep dive today, let's tie it all together. We've explored Dr. Dava's perspective on finding meaning, understanding our human condition, getting ourselves in line with the principles of existence, and looking inward to develop inner strength and peace. We saw how that connects with the core ideas of Stoicism, from focusing on what we can control to practicing mindfulness and reflecting on our own mortality.
Powerful stuff.
And we touched on how these practices can help us face life's challenges with more resilience.
Right.
And even help us appreciate the present moment more and live more fulfilling lives.
Absolutely.
I think what's sticking with me is this idea of inner transformation. It's not about waiting for the world to change or for things to be perfect. It's about doing the work on ourselves to develop wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance within.
And it's a journey, not a destination. There will be good times and bad times, moments of clarity and moments of confusion.
Right.
But what matters is to keep practicing, keep learning, keep trying to live a life that matches our values and how we understand the world.
So here's a final question to ponder as you go about your day. What's one little step you can take today to bring these Stoic principles into your life? Maybe it's taking a moment to notice your breath, or questioning a negative thought, or just being thankful for something simple. Remember, even the smallest actions, when we do them consistently, can lead to big changes.
And as you go on this journey of self-discovery and growth, remember you're not alone. There's this rich tradition of Stoic wisdom you can tap into, as well as a whole community of people today rediscovering the power of these old teachings. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep seeking out the things that inspire you.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And for all of you listening out there, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We'll see you next time.